I think we're going to go ahead then and take questions from the audience and our viewers participating online. So again, for members of our live audience, if you have a question, please just write it down and someone will come around and pick that up from our project staff. And then for our virtual audience, please tweet your questions. There's still time using the webcast series #CreatePathways. So let's begin with our first question from Twitter. @efongelise tweets, how do you forecast what the long-term local economic needs are today that will still be relevant 5, 10, 15 years from now? Donald, would you like to take a stab at this one?
Okay, thank you. I said it as an introduction a moment ago, come to think of it.
Right.
When I talked about the strategic plans that I've seen at IBM, many companies have those. You also have government agencies that's working in economic and workforce development organizations across this country. They are linked with their highest level of government in that state, as well as with the national leadership teams. Now, what you will find is that things don't happen just in a vacuum, so to speak. Things don't happen because we think it's nice to do today. There's a lot of forecasting that go on years and years in advance. As a matter of fact, the financial investments alone require that forward thinking and forward planning. And even when I would say politics can play a role, it does not from this perspective, because it is a sustained need for the workforce, a sustained need for those developing elements of that company, of that, I would say, local, state, regional, as well as national.
Chris, would you have anything to add about tools from the federal perspective?
Well, I know certainly our partners at the Department of Labor put out a lot of different resources that help with the forecasting, and they can be broken down to regional and county and local levels, and you can do it in different time increments. And I think those are all very useful, and the stronger examples of bridge programs and career pathways that we've seen kind of anecdotally as we're out visiting and working with different programs certainly turn to those kinds of forecasting tools. I would also underscore the importance that was mentioned earlier by Don too, in terms of just working the partnership and the outside of the meeting room knowledge that you can garner, because there are people who probably have their ear more finely tuned to what's coming on the horizon. And I think too, with the forecasting, we have to be realistic too, and we have to be very flexible because the sand's always shifting.
Right.
And I think that kind of comes back to that point of not just teaching people for that particular, or contextualizing for that particular sector or bridge program, but so it's not just the learning piece, it's the learning to learn piece too, because like Tom said, the job won't be the same. Even if you finish the program and get your credential and move on to that dream job, that job will change, and you may not need to come back to school, but you will need to continue to learn.
You know, a very quick nugget on that is that many jobs that we have today did not exist 5 or less years ago. Right. And the trend continues to accelerate. So we need for our workforce to be ready and the skills to make that happen, the educational infrastructure that's sound.
Okay, great. Our next question, again, from Twitter @Dorian JC. What are various sources of funding to sustain bridge programs? I'm going to start with you, and then maybe we can have business tell us how. Well, and then there's always OVE too, so we can go.
Right. Well, I mean, for me, this has been evolving over time. We really got started with, some of you may remember, this Empowerment Zone program in previous administrations, and so that allowed us to develop something new and get some resources for it. Then for a while, we were experiencing quite a few manufacturing plant closings within Chicago. And so a lot of those individuals were then eligible for assistance under the Trade Act. And so Trade Act funding became important. And as we were doing this, we were also then able to get our program approved to be able to take people with vouchers under the Workforce Investment Act, you know, the ITA's, Individual Training Account vouchers. And of course, at the same time, we're also talking with the foundation community and looking at aspects or components of the program that we might not be able to do, you know, with the public funding. So private funding became very important.
Great.
And I can say also that years ago, many corporations had their own educational departments, and matter of fact, some of them very elaborate in how they would handle all of their training inside. And then many business leaders begin to say, hey, we're not in the education business. Let's hire someone else to do that for us. Let's link with a community college. Let's link with a specialized educational company or institution to provide that for us. And what you will find today, many companies will still pay to have someone to do that for them. So when there is a need that's met in terms of the opportunity to provide a company with that service, there's business opportunity there for an educational institution to come in and say, we have the skilled educators to do that. We have a skilled infrastructure, especially around internet and IT-based technologies to make that happen for you.
Well, obviously, OVE has both adult education and Perkins Career and Technical Education funds, which I think are certainly valuable resources, and each, of course, carries their statutory requirements or limitations, so there's probably, in many cases, a need to braid OVE's funding with other sources of funds. And I think along those lines, something that we're seeing more and more, again, from our sort of visits in the field, and also probably most recently we had a national dialogue on career pathways back in early October in Washington, D.C., and we had about 80 folks from across the country, real thought leaders and sort of what I would call cross-sector thought leaders. We had K-12, we had career and technical education, post-secondary, we had industry. I mean, anybody who should be at the table when you talk about career pathways and bridge programs was somehow represented in that conversation. And a big piece of the successful braiding seems to be going back to that business of the forecasting and having the vision and having the plan and having the roadmap so that each subsequent opportunity builds on its predecessor and positions you for that new one that just got released, whether it's federal money, foundation money, whatever it happens to be. You were working on this OVE project, and then you were involved in this Joyce Foundation initiative, and then all of a sudden accelerating opportunities came along, and you were just well positioned. And so much of it goes back to doing the due diligence, doing the forecasting, doing the data analysis, creating the vision, and coming up with the roadmap.
I think exactly. This is also a benefit of a partnership of community-based organizations with the community college and with business. When we're all at the table and we all have some advantages for particular kinds of funding. We're not going to get Perkins funding as a community organization, but we're well positioned to go for foundation funding. So we're able to, in a partnership, bring a wider array of resources together.
Great. So this question comes from an audience member here, Lori Sheridan. In adult education, we currently have an aging, underpaid, overextended workforce. How can we enable them to gain the skills to help foster career pathways for their students? Do I have that right? I'm going to toss that. How about you, Tom? I'm going to start with you. I'm like,
not because I'm in the, no, aging.
Are you the aging underpaid?
No. Yeah. You know, I had a chance in preparing for this. Michelle sent me kind of an advanced copy, if you will, of the course, and I really think it's exciting to see something that's going to be interactive and online, which gives us the opportunity to be able to access that from anywhere, right? That we have a computer at home or at work, et cetera. And there's a lot of great material. I'm saying that honestly. I think you did a wonderful job in pulling everything together. And it's going to take an investment of time for people to go through it, but I think it's going to be time well spent.
I think,
Chris?
too, in kind of, and I don't know that this is an answer to that question, but it's a comment on the question. One thing that comes to mind immediately is that some people are doing it. Some people are figuring it out. So I think one thing we have to do in trying to answer what I think is a very complex question is to connect with those people and figure out what it is that they're doing. I don't know that there's an adult educator anywhere in this country who would describe themselves as overpaid. But I do know from visiting different programs, from running a program prior to coming into federal service, that there are decisions that are made about how much teachers will be paid, and there are decisions that are made about how much service we will offer, and sort of quality-quantity trade-offs that are made at the local level. And I think in sort of untangling that question at the local program level, one thing we have to ask ourselves are what are those decisions that we're making, and what other kinds of decisions are other people making in kind of getting at that. Putting that point aside, too, something that comes to mind, not as a Fed, but more as a former local program director, is, am I trying to bring the right people up to speed in terms of their ability and their willingness to do this? Now, I don't want people's minds to go to, oh, he's saying fire the teachers who don't want to do this. That's not what I'm saying. I'm sure there are lots of other courses that they would be great at teaching, and maybe not necessarily the bridge courses that are part of a Career Pathways program. But I do think there is a strategy in figuring out who are the teachers who really can do it. It kind of goes back to one of Tom's earlier comments about we just had the right teacher who knew how to do this. Well, that's great. We also have to figure out how to help other teachers learn to be that right teacher. But my experience as a former local would suggest to me that that's not all teachers, that not all teachers will want to. And so it comes back to, I think, some decisions that I'm making locally about who is going to get on the bus and do this, and how do I support them.
Right.
And Lori, real quick, I would submit to Lori that you went into education not for the money. It was for your commitment to better others. And I think this means a lot. And I think there's a way to share the love, so to speak. And sharing that love is having people come into your classroom that have particular skill sets and or career pathways. I do a lot of classroom sessions in the day of an engineer. In the day, matter of fact, I even clone myself and go into other aspects of it, from the accounting side all the way down to the technical marketing side. Because I've been exposed to those type of things, you're able to communicate to students, and you're also able to do a mini professional development for that educator in giving them content. Because many times when I leave that classroom, it's sort of a personal commitment. I will give them a CD of my PowerPoint slides, all the photographs, and all my resources that they can use, and say, call me later. And my short closing remark to that is, I think you will find these people are very supportive, and industry leaders support that.
Yeah, maybe another little item is for instructors to be able to go out to employers, not just the one doing curriculum development, but for the instructors together, and also to go to trade shows, within a particular industry, where you see a lot of the equipment or information, being brought to bear on the future within that particular industry. So
Absolutely. Don't shoot me. But real quick,
No.
we sent out 12 teachers this summer, for a summer internship. They call it externship. And so those teachers actually worked in industry, and they were related to the STEM areas that they were teaching.
That's great.
It was powerful to hear their responses.
I think, too, kind of building on Don's point, I think that there are aspects of the National Education Technology Plan, and those of us who are here at the conference heard our Assistant Secretary mention in her luncheon keynote speech about the wonderful opportunity that open education resources present. And that National Education Technology Plan introduces the whole notion of flipped classrooms. If you can't bring a person in, how can you harness technology so that somebody who can counterbalance maybe what a teacher can't bring can get to the student, and the teacher can play a different kind of role in the learning. So I think there's that potential too. It is a very complex question, and
Multifaceted.
yes, it doesn't have the 3 bullet
Yes, and we wish it could just nail that one real easily, but okay.